Hello and welcome to SciLux, the podcast where we talk about scientific developments and technological changes in Luxembourg, as usual powered by Research Luxembourg and recording at the RTL City Studios. Our guest today is Bruno Teheux, who is assistant professor at the Department of Mathematics at the University of Luxembourg. Bruno started his research career at the University of Liège, and except for studying logic using algebra, he's done numerous science communication activities. You might have met him at the Researchers' Days, the Science Festival, the Sound of Data, or even in Dubai, if you were lucky to visit the Luxembourg Pavilion during Expo 2020. Bruno, thank you very much for coming today.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, good to hear that. So, of course, this time we'll be talking a lot about your science communication activities, your outreach activities. But first, I wanted to also tick the box, let's say, so discuss a little bit your research. So what you're doing behind the scenes for the general public, if you want. And when I was preparing, I discovered we have something in common that I didn't know. So a bit of Polish background, let's say, because the logic that you looked at least in the past for your PhD, was the Łukasiewicz logic. So an important Polish scientist there.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, I'm working in a field called mathematical logic and in a subfield which is algebraic logic, and Polish people are quite strong into it. And so, Łukasiewicz, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he was not doing algebraic logic, but he was inventing this logic. He was a philosopher and a logician. But there's another famous name from Poland about algebraic logic. It's Tarski, Alfred Tarski. So yeah, we have this connection.
I'm happy to hear that there are Polish people somewhere there, because we are, of course, always looking for famous scientists as well. And of course, you know Skłodowska-Curie or Copernicus if you want. But I think Łukasiewicz might not be so famous to especially our listeners here in Luxembourg. So good to mention that. So you said algebraic logic. Can you explain a little bit more? What is it exactly that you do?
So the idea is that we use the tools of algebras to study logic and deductive systems. So it's a bit wide if I describe it like that. But to give you an idea of the kind of things we can do, we study the expressive power of the different mathematical languages. So if we have, a mathematical object, like a space, for instance, you can try to describe it using different languages. To make metaphor, imagine that you're studying wine, and you could use the terminology of colors to describe the wine, or you could use the terminology of smell or of taste, or maybe chemistry. And so if you use these different type of terminology, you will be able to describe different properties of the wine, but maybe not the same. And it's a bit the same with this particular problem in mathematical logic. So you're trying to bound what you can express with the different mathematical languages. What kind of properties, what kind of characterization you can express with the languages.
Why do you need to define the limits?
So if you want to describe some kind of properties, you know which languages you have to turn to. And that's one of the key points. And the other key point is also some languages can express the same type of properties, but the cost is different. And so it's good to know which one will be cost less than the other one.
We don't want to go too deep into it because that's becoming, I think, too technical for our listeners. But for sure, part of it is also the pub quiz question you prepared today. But before I ask you to ask it, we have to discuss one of the important terms that you are going to use it, which is a conjecture. So what is that and why are we talking about it here in this context?
Yeah, so right. A conjecture is a mathematical statement that mathematicians believe is true, but that has not been proved yet. Okay, so it's something we strongly believe it's true. We don't have any counterexample. Mathematicians are trying to prove it, but it's not proved yet. So it's not sure yet. It's just like faith. We believe it's true.
And now, if you can ask a question, if listeners remember, the answer will be only at the end of the podcast.
Right, so the question is the following. It's a question about geometry. So maybe you can imagine you're a kid and you're drawing on a sheet of paper. So you're drawing on the plane, and you imagine that you're drawing a curve. So you put your pen on the sheet of paper and you start drawing a curve, and then you just go back to your starting point. And this is called the closed curve, and you make sure that the curve doesn't intersect itself. And there's a mathematical statement that says that for any closed curve like that, you can always find 4 points on the curve that, if you put the lines together, that make a square. And so the pub quiz question is the following. This precise statement, is it a theorem? Is it false? Is it a conjecture?
So we're going to reveal the answer to this question at the very end of the podcast. So listen to all of it, unless you're already Googling, but then still listen, because we're definitely going to be describing interesting things. Okay, so now we have the question, your research, and we go into outreach. First of all, why outreach? Why did you decide to go for it? Is there something wrong with math? And that's why you said, I need to do something so that people are more interested in it. What was the background to it?
To be honest, I think I tried it and I loved it, and that's why I was going into it. The idea behind the outreach activities I conduct, and that I conduct with my usual suspect, who are Hugo Parlier from the Department of Mathematics and Kiefer from Lucet, for instance. General idea is like to give people the opportunity to experience the life of a researcher in math. Because when you do mathematics at school, it's very much about exercises, which are a lot like algorithms you have to apply or tools you have to master. But the life of a mathematician is not about that. I'm also spending quite a lot of time teaching, so explaining mathematics. So I wanted to do something different with mathematics and with communicating mathematics. And putting people in the situation of doing math like a researcher is really, really exciting.
So doing maths, not in the sense of studying all the functions, let's say, or the formulas, but you said experimenting, right?
Yeah, exploring. Like, you give a problem, but you don't say it's a mathematical problem, otherwise people won't like to do it. So you just came with, for instance, a game, and people start playing with the game, and then the game has a nature which comes from mathematics, or it has mathematical ingredients. Maybe it's hidden, but when you start playing with it, you realize that. And then you actually are starting exploring a mathematical universe and getting intuition about it. Maybe you can't formalize what you're learning, and the idea is not like we want you to formalize that, but we want you to maybe be able to get conjecture, maybe small one, like getting some ideas, being able to combine some of the movements that you're able to do to go to your objective and explore.
So you mentioned that you don't say it's maths, or you don't give, this is this theorem or this formula. Why? Are people really so afraid? If you tell them that in the beginning, they will run away?
I mean, if you try that, if you try to say to someone, do you want to do some mathematical activity?
I'll say, yes, yeah, I do.
Because you love math, you told me. But, 9 times out of 10, if you tell people I'm a mathematician, you will get, I was very bad at math when I was a kid or something like that. Or even I have experienced sometimes elderly people, they come to us and they explain that they were really afraid of math when they were at school. And it's a kind of treatment for them. Yeah, so the idea is that because we don't want to afraid people, we just want them to try. If you tell people you're going to do math, in their imagination, they're going to use formulas and stuff like that, which will not be the case in the activity. Of course, math is also a language, so you have these formulas and so on, but it's just a part of the topic.
And it's also about making mistakes, isn't it?
It's a lot about making mistakes. A researcher in math is probably doing, or she's probably doing, much more mistakes than proving theorems. It's really often that we do mistakes. Even like we are doing a mistake, we are correcting it, and then we continue like exploring, trying to prove something. And in my experience, I sometimes like push the mistake further away until a point where, I see the mistake now, but I can't solve it anymore. So I have the feeling I can spend several days thinking I just solved the problem. So putting the mistake away, and then at the end of the day, no, it's still there. But mistakes is also inspiring, because from mistakes, you give limits to your knowledge, you give limits to the objects you are studying. So
but that's not the feeling we get from the classical maths education, do we?
You're completely right. That's the problem. Mistakes are kind of bad when you're at school. So that's part of the problem.
And
it should be allowed to be mistake. But you do a mistake, you are punished in some way, at least in terms of grade.
Yes. So what you're trying to do is also showing that to people that it's cool to make mistakes through the games or through other activities, right?
Actually, with some of the activities we have, it's impossible to make mistakes. It's a bit different. Like, we don't put people in the situation in which they've done a mistake, so they are not afraid of doing a mistake. It's impossible, actually.
And one of it is the games that you've done. These were the games that were also shown at the Luxembourg Pavilion, right?
Yeah, exactly. So with Hugo Parlier, in our spare time, we invent.
You have a lot of spare time, by the way, it seems, because you've invented so many different things additional.
No, I mean, doing the games is like part of my job, like getting with people, but like inventing the games is more like a hobby, you know. So we wanted something very easy to understand, to be able to start with. So in 10 seconds, we can explain how to play. And it's a kind of puzzle. And there are several types of them. And each time we have a sequence of puzzles, and they are increasingly difficult. So the first puzzle is normally very easy. And so you get positive feedback very fast. And so you try the second one, and okay, it's a bit more difficult, but it's still quite easy. So you get another positive feedback, and then you get addicted to the positive feedback. It becomes difficult. And then you really want to do it because you have all the positive feedback. And during the process, during the sequence, you are actually exploring a mathematical structure and getting intuition about it. And then with the intuition, you can predict what type of moves will give you the answer and stuff like that.
And people really do get addicted. I heard that, at the pavilion, they would stay for quite some time, right?
Yeah. So we were lucky to go to the Luxembourg pavilion in Expo 2020 in Dubai. So we were very happy that they accepted to host us for 2 times 10 days. So the first time we went with the games, and so it's quite funny because in the pavilion there was a slide, and so people knew it, and they wanted to go into the pavilion for the slide. But then we were like stopping them and just asking them, do you want to start playing a game first? It's just take a few minutes if you want. And then some of them were staying an hour and a half. But usually you stay 10 minutes in such kind of pavilion. So
the games were well designed then.
Yeah, for that purpose, it was really nice.
I haven't played them, but I did definitely draw some lines at certain moment and some shapes. And I think that was related to Sound of Data, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was also another incredible project, which was a collaboration between the FNR, the University of Luxembourg, the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, and the ROCAL. It's also a project with Hugo Parlier. We gathered I think now it's 20,000 drawings in Luxembourg, also in Dubai. And these drawings are geometric drawings, like curves. Then we extracted some data out of the drawings and gave this data to different artists. And it's not like we decided what kind of data we wanted to give to the artists. We just discussed with them. And we collaborated with 3 artists. In our case, it was Thomas Evans, Esther Bolle, and Mike van den Hamme. And they kind of sonified the data and produced music out of it. And then the music was shown with visualization that we created for this occasion at Rock Hall for a very interesting concert in December. It was like the first time in my life where I used mathematics to go to the concert and see mathematics live and hear to mathematics live. So it was really exciting.
Of course. And it's again kind of translating one language into another language, right? But this time language of mathematics into language of art or music.
Yes. And we put a lot of emphasis on the human aspect out of it. So the project was part of the Sound of Data project. So it's about sonification. But there's many ways you can look at sonification. And sonification can be really a scientific tool to turn data into sound, to learn about data. But with Hugo, we wanted to insist more on the human aspect out of it. So the interaction with the artist was really about that. So what they are looking for as an artist and what we can provide with the drawings. In particular, like the curve drawings that we were collecting, I didn't open all of them. I probably opened like 10,000 of them. And when we needed to do that, we saw really very beautiful drawings. It was really impressive how people can be creative using just a curve.
And then you were showing the drawings to the artist, or you were actually showing kind of more raw data, let's say, that you got out of them?
So it depended. For some of them, we show drawings and then they make a selection out of them. And for others, so for instance, for the curves, we created an average curve of all the curves. And then we extracted some data out of it and we give this data and the curve to the artist. So this was Estebol.
So human aspect, you said. So what was it? It was more about learning how the artist works and then trying to provide him some material that they could use?
Well, first of all, most of the time when we were collecting drawings, we were with the people. When I saw the drawings on my computer afterwards, I could recognize some of them because I could recognize the experience, the interaction I had with the people. And also, when you see the drawing, it's not scientific what I'm going to say, but I could more or less recognize the drawings that were made in Dubai from drawings that were made in Luxembourg. It's not the same kind of drawing, so it would be interesting to turn that into a research project. But when you see them, on average, it's quite clear. And also, there's a trend in using AI to produce music or to produce art and something like that. So it's very interesting. But we wanted something more focused on the people. So when we do the average curve, for instance, it's really we take everything into consideration, every drawing. And so in the final drawing, there's a bit of everyone into it. And for the curve, it's kind of the same. We selected some curves and we also make a space of curves. So in a space with a notion of distance in it. And we created some path trying to minimize the distance between the drawings. And so even if we only show the curve which are on the path, every other curves has an influence on the path because it influences the distance in the space.
That's extremely creative. Maths creativity? What's going on here?
Do you think that math is not creative? Math is a lot about creativity. So maybe people don't realize that because at school, I think we already said that it's a lot about learning tools, but mathematicians, they need to master the tools and then they need to be creative to combine the tools to create new knowledge.
And that's what you're trying to show as well through the outreach activities, or not?
In some way, yes. Because for instance, when you're playing the games, you really need to think, there are some puzzles you need to break your usual patterns in your brain to be able to solve them. So that's true. Also, there's this Math en Jeans project, which is a project for high school. So we give small research projects to high school students and they work in group on these projects. But it's nothing related to school mathematics. It's really projects. They don't know the math about them. They kind of have to invent the math and to combine maybe their knowledge to explore these projects. So that's true. But the outreach activities we conduct are also a way to provide different entry doors to mathematics. Because probably to be interested in math, you need to make sense about math. And there's not a single way to make sense. Usually people think about, okay, if you need to make sense about math, you need to talk about application. But it's only a way to make sense. You can also talk about math and art. Or you can also use games to put the sense before the math, for instance.
And then enter the comics. So once again, another subject that you looked at, so science comics and maths and science comics. So what was the project about and what are you trying to do with that application? Sorry to use that word. I can see you don't like it.
No, there's nothing wrong about an application. Mathematics is everywhere nowadays in every technology, and it has always been like that. It's very good to have applications, but it's not the only way to interest people into math. Yeah, so comics, the idea was to use this medium to do science communication for teenagers. So that was the original project. And then it's a project that is led by Serge Hahn, also from the Faculty of Science, and Oliver Glassel. And they turned it into a workshop, a training into science communication for PhD students. So the idea is that PhD students come with a topic and they are paired with an artist who's going to draw the script that the PhD student write in collaboration with experts. Of course, the idea behind comics is that it's fun, it's visual, it's attractive, and so it's yet another entry point to science. It's not only about math in this project, it's also about science in general. And what I especially like with comics with respect to science is that, for instance, if you do a model in science, you have some experiments and you need to make the bridges between the experiments to explain what goes behind the experiments and to make a model that is predictive and so on. But like, you need to fill in the gap between the experiments to have something coherent. And in the comics, it's kind of the same because you have the panels, but the panels give you only a part of the information. You have to recreate the whole story and the gap between panels in your mind. So it's kind of similar. And it's in particular true for mathematics because when you read a theorem, there's not all information in what is written. You have to really reconstruct your own proof in the brain, exactly as you were reconstructing a story between the panels in the comics.
And the comics, right now, there are, I think, 2 volumes, right? We can find them.
So there's actually 3 volumes. The first one was called Through the Looking Glass. It was like kind of the first experiment. And then it became, a series called L'Explorations. And the third volume is being written right now.
Okay, so the collaboration is just really ongoing.
Yeah. And once again, it's very interesting to work with different people because there's PhD students in science, not necessarily in mathematics. There's the artists who are drawing the comics. And then there's the people who help us to script the stories, Veronica Mischitz and Jessica Burton. So it's really different people with different perspectives on the project. And this is really excellent.
I have to say, I'm very surprised. You keep talking about the human factor, the social factor. And I would expect, I'm talking to a mathematician. You just, stay in your dark room and do some calculations.
I hate doing calculations. I'm not a mathematician who do calculations. So some of them.
Sorry, I'm dropping a stereotype. I know.
No, but I mean, that's part of the the experience here. So I know it. No, so yeah, mathematics is basically a social activity. You need to communicate with your colleagues. You need to work together. You need to communicate your results, but also your mistakes. And so we can spend a lot of time in a small room together, like on the blackboard, and then exchanging ideas. And of course, when you understand something, it's always like you're alone in silence. So even in this working session, there's like long period when we are silent because we're just like digesting what we've just learned. But yeah, mathematics, it's a collective journey that started several hundred years ago, like maybe 2000 years ago or something like that.
So we have the role of silence, the role of collectivity, the fact that it's a social thing. But if you were to give me a definition, what really mathematics is for you, what would you say?
Apparently, it's the perfect science as you describe it now, right? Well, this is a difficult question. I guess there's not a single answer to it. Probably like scientists will tell you what, mathematics, it's a language. It's the language of science, and it's very convenient because it's rigorous and it helps us to make models which are predictive, that helps us to give predictions and so on. So, I don't know, maybe I can try to give some ingredients that are present in all type of mathematics. So probably mathematics is about finding relationships between structures or finding patterns. And to do that, you need to learn tools, that's right. And then you need to creatively apply these tools to find these patterns. And it's also a lot about classifying objects and maybe using original tools to explore the objects you are studying. It's also universal because you need, it's true when you prove a theorem, it's true forever and it's true for everyone. And so in particular, I think it explains why you need rigor, because you're basically talking about ideas. If you take a geologist, he's going to talk about some kind of stone, then he can give the stone to his colleague and then they will talk about the same stone, so that's clear. But mathematicians, they are talking about abstractions, so they are talking about ideas. So they need to be very precise to be sure that everyone has the same ideas, and that's why we need rigor. And I think this rigor and this precision is part of the fact that the mathematics is universal. And yeah, so I already said it's the building block of a collective journey that started like in antiquity. And we always know it's part of every technology nowadays. It's like the building, one of the most important building blocks of our economy. So.
But it's already integrated there. Why do we need to study it? I mean, you just write a program, you don't need to necessarily know how it calculates things.
Well, first of all, mathematics is not only about computations, right? And anyway, using software like to do your computation is like using a black box. It's very important to be able to understand what the black box is doing to be able to use the proper black box, and also to develop your own black box.
I have to say that when I was preparing for our discussion today, I sent you some questions and the reply was, oh, this is outdated mathematics. This is not what we are talking about nowadays. So is that because still, as you said, mathematics is not about calculations. Mathematics is not necessarily what we do at school. And we still have that thinking ourselves that if I'm not a mathematician, I stop at a certain moment. I know I stopped at calculus or whatever. And that's what I think mathematics is. And it's completely not where you are as mathematicians right now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to say it's outdated. I wanted to say that the problem with mathematics for the general audience is that mathematics for them stopped like in the 18th century. Because the mathematics we learn at school, it stopped at the 18th century. Of course, we always use these tools nowadays, and they are very important and they are still true, but they have a perspective that mathematics is all over, it's done. We don't create something new in mathematics. And it's exactly the opposite. They are like topics that were born like in the 20th century, and that are really, really contemporary, and then they are developing and then they are very important.
And why is it that we don't hear about them that much? Because they are more the language behind the scenes. Nowadays, I would say that if you're saying that it's very, very current and there's a lot going on, why the general public doesn't hear about it as much as ChatGPT?
Well, one of the reasons is that mathematics is like a layer science. You kind of need to understand the basic layers to be able to understand the more modern layers. And it's not as easy to communicate to the general audience. I mean, we tried to, at the beginning of the podcast here, we tried to give some general idea of my research topic, but it would be quite difficult to explain what is really behind it concretely and to go into it deeply.
Of course. And I have to say that I also, when I was preparing a little bit more about Łukasiewicz today for the discussion, I started reading more about the logic and whatever. And I was like, oh God, I have 2 hours. I will not be able to understand it all.
And by the way, there's a lot of mathematics behind ChatGPT. So
Of course, we don't question that. This is definitely true. Okay, I think I got more or less what I wanted today. It was really, really interesting. And this is the moment to go back to the pub quiz question that you asked in the beginning. So my request is please repeat the question and then give us the answer.
Okay, so the question was the following. So there's a mathematical statement that goes like that. Okay, so you imagine that you're drawing a curve in the plane, so on a sheet of paper. It's a closed curve, so it means that you come back to your original point, but the curve doesn't intersect itself. And there's a statement that says that on such a curve, you can always find 4 points that form a square. And the question was, this statement, is it proved? Is it a conjecture? Is it false? And the answer is, it's a conjecture. So the conjecture is open like since more than 100 years. There are some progress that has been made about it. So we know nowadays that there's always 4 points that make a rectangle, but we don't know yet if you can always find 4 points that make a square. It's a conjecture. We believe it's true, but it's not proved yet.
So it means there are quite a few mathematicians sitting at their desks right now and thinking about it and trying to prove it.
It's difficult to say, but yeah, there are, like during the pandemic, there was some progress about it. So,
People had more time to think. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Probably. It's probably
More
because-
silence. You said silence is important for mathematics.
Yeah, but we were very happy when the pandemic went over, because like these meetings and this social aspect was back on the track again.
Of course.
Even though we kind of learned to work also with these online tools. It was
Still,
made-
the collectivity, as we
collectivity,
mentioned,
yes.
right? Important as well. Okay, what remains is to ask you where people can meet you again. What are you going to show us soon as part of your science communication activities?
So probably next time will be the Science Festival in November. So in Neumünster Abbey. It's one of our favorite activities because we spend 4 days with the general audience and it's really fun. If you've never been there, you should really go.
Yes, I have. And I confirm totally that this is an amazing event. I think very tiring for the people who are actually there for 4 days non-stop.
Yeah, that's true that I usually get sick after that, but it's such a pleasure.
Okay.
I will not miss it.
So you will not reveal what you're going to show? Maybe a little?
Oh, we have a plan for a new puzzle, but like human size.
Okay, good. So you see,
well-
definitely look for Bruno there. I will be myself as well there, so you can visit both of us and say hello if you're around. And thank you, Bruno, so much for talking to us today and telling all about mathematics and all the different important factors of it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And as usual, listeners, don't forget to subscribe, to follow us, to check out what we're writing on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Do share your opinions with us, rate us, write which guests we should have in the next episodes. And yeah, just keep listening. Thank you very much. This was Scilax, and my name is Hanna Siemaszko.